早啊 Siri，Bye 啊 Siri。Today I am gonna start the lesson 5 of Draw a Boss. So let's get it. Let's get it. 播歌先，好似好耐冇畫畫，好似好耐冇練畫，唔係好熟嗰個操作。而家突然之間歌都冇穩定，嘢都唔係好識講啊。因為呢就生咗粒飛枝，咁就啦。播呢個咯，呢個咁就，然後呢就睇下先 ，Lesson 5啊，就 cap 翻，咪要 cap 翻呢個。有叮叮大聲，係嘛？唔知就俾咗呢個先咯。cap 唔到嘅，咁樣就。Today 就係咁樣啦。OK， 嚟，話說啊，前情提要，前咩提要啊？唔記得。上集提要就畫到去 lesson 4嘅最尾噶啦，即係已經畫晒啲蟲噶啦，蟲嗰 part 玩完 ，OK， 蟲嗰 part 玩完，咁樣就。之後呢，就會係動物嗰 part， 哇！係呢個好多波浪嘅畫布啊，好懷念啊！好似我啲紀念鈔咁啊！計時掣，喂，計時掣喺邊啊？計時掣撳邊個啊？呢個，因為睇字其實都係學緊畫噶嘛，咁就都要計時噶啦。咁就而家係幾多啊？369。18、19已經係邁進緊，向200個鐘邁進緊。咁樣呢就係啦。 係啦，之後我就要起啲動物出嚟啦。我希望起啲動物出嚟係同起啲蟲出嚟差唔多啦。哇！呢段片50分鐘喎，哈！好啊，慢慢睇啊。I don't fucking care。熄返個音樂，定係開住嚟聽下先，因為佢勁細聲。
So this week we are talking about lesson 5, which is all about drawing animals. As usual, if you're looking at this video or trying out this
as
lesson,
usual 係細聲 as fuck 㗎啦。
Lessons 1 and 2, as well as 3 and 4. And this is largely because lessons 1 and 2 kind of teach you the building blocks that we're going to be playing with, all the tools that we're going to be using, like different kinds of forms, organic forms, and so on. And lessons 3 and 4 start in the process of teaching you what constructive drawing is. So if you haven't completed those, definitely go back and do them before you continue watching this video.
哦，開台通知黐線，真係變咗關台通知啊！而家撳一撳先，有冇嘢出？冇嘢出，未登入。
So I've got quite a few things that I want to touch upon because over the past couple of years, people have really struggled with certain elements that are applied to using construction when drawing animals. And so I'll try and clarify each of those points individually. The first thing that we need to go over is the basic structure of an animal's body. And it's basically the same as a human's body, not that I expect you to have touched upon that subject yet, but they are composed of 3 different components. And actually this is somewhat similar to the insects as well, which had their head, thorax, and abdomen. But here we have actually a cranium. And note that I'm using that terminology. The cranium is supposed to be the back part of the skull, I believe. So it's not the whole head. Keep that in mind. Then you have the rib cage. And you have the pelvis.
Cranium 即係咩啊？頭骨 cranium rib 肋骨
rib cage
跟住係 ribs 盤骨
pelvis 肋骨頭骨肋骨盤骨。
And notice that while the cranium is more or less a spherical ball, the rib cage and the pelvis are both deformed in order to fit the actual mass that they're representing. So oftentimes the rib cage will be considerably larger and the pelvis will be smaller. Additionally, take a look at the particular angles that I've drawn them at. You want to look at your reference image very closely to kind of inform the decisions that you're making as to the size, the angle, and so on when drawing these masses. Because unlike the cranium, all of this has to really, like, it's not just a circle. It's going to match exactly what you see there, or close enough to it anyways. At first it'll be a little bit tricky to, first of all, see where the rib cage might be, because you don't have x-ray vision. You can only see the outer layer of the animal that you're looking at. But with time you'll start to notice little hints and suggestions along the surface that actually tell you roughly where the rib cage actually extends to. Additionally, it can be difficult to really nail these angles initially, but you'll get better at it with practice. And if you happen to make a little mistake here and there, just keep pushing forwards. Trust me, I do it all the time. I'm not perfect at this, and neither will you be. Not for a while. So the second component of this is that
有冇轉翻？冇轉翻 movie 冇，唔怪得。怪怪的 ，OK。
Actually, no. First, let's talk about how all of this is tied together with a spine, just like in your body. And the spine will often run, well, pretty much always will run closer towards the back. If this part here is the front, then their back will be where their spine is going to be situated, roughly. And remember that tails are just an extension of the spine, so keep that in mind. And so the part that I wanted to mention was that I always, one of the earliest things that I do, sometimes I'll even do this before even drawing the head, the cranium mass, I connect this into a sausage. And you'll remember these from lesson 2. All of the organic forms with contour curves that I forced you to draw. These come in very handy here, and notice the shape that I'm using. The specific dips and like how this here kind of pinches in and it comes out on this side, on the bottom. Always try and follow that shape. You'll notice that in most situations actually, you'll have a bigger bump in the back. Ignore it for now. Always draw your back so that this section is tucking in. That'll allow you to keep your widths nice and consistent, which will make your organic form much more solid, and you want a nice and solid base to be constructing everything off of. We will eventually add in more forms to deal with this sort of bump, but for now, just ignore it. Always follow this recipe. I always tell people to constantly stare at their reference, but try and imagine that there is an actual dip here, even underneath all the extra muscles and masses. So I guess the next thing to jump to is actually talking about those extra masses. Since this is the first basic form that you're going to be constructing from your other, ball masses, you will afterwards, you might want to look into adding more forms on top of this. And this is where the organic intersections from lesson 2 comes in, where you're wrapping forms around each other. So here I've got a separate mass that is sitting on top of our initial sausage. And you'll see that I've actually added some contour curves to just show how it has its own volume, and it's not just a flat shape that I'm adding to the two-dimensional drawing. This is an actual 3D form that we're piling on top, so you need to be aware of how it's going to wrap around and conform to the underlying form. And so anywhere you see on your reference image that you've got these additional bumps and masses and things, you really want to flesh them out as being solid forms. You can't just, say, okay, well, this guy has a little bump here, so I'm just going to add that. No, you have to actually flesh it out and understand how the forms are interacting with each other. So you'll actually find that oftentimes I'll just, in some of my demos, I'll throw them in wherever it seems that I need extra mass. So it's a very flexible tool that you can use. Next, let's talk about, so this is a bit of a combination, and it's all about how things intersect and connect to this basic fundamental form. So the first one that I usually tackle before I even talk about the legs, which is a major component that fits and connects onto the torso, I want to talk about the neck. So I will usually actually turn my sausage into a bit of a sort of flattened cap, so you could imagine that this was flat, because this helps me think about how the separate form of the neck is actually going to connect. And the neck is really just a sort of transitional form that leads from the cranium back to the torso, but I really want to be aware of how it connects these two and how they intersect. So these underlying ellipses that I've drawn are really important in understanding how everything comes together. So you can already see that this feels more three-dimensional. Like, you can't really tell what it is, but you can tell that there's a sort of body mass, that there's a neck. This doesn't really make much sense yet. And oftentimes I start off considering this thing to be the cranium, but then as I build it up, I might find that it's perhaps a little bit too small, or the way that it's related to the neck is not quite matching what the cranium would be. So in those situations, I'll just add and I'll start treating it just as like the nub of the end of the neck, and I'll attach a sphere to it. Now this is our cranium. But we'll talk about that again in a bit. The next thing I want to talk about is the legs. So a lot of people, the first mistake that I start seeing is that they attach the legs to the bottom of their body. And this is not entirely correct. So let's get that. Now, it could look okay, but the problem is that you're completely ignoring the shoulder muscles. There's a whole mass here. That actually pretty much makes it way more correct than it was before. So if you add them like this. So you can't just ignore this whole bulky mass that you might not entirely be able to see on your reference image that clearly, because it's facing right towards you, so the shadows that usually describe that form are very easy to miss at times if you're not aware of the fact that they're there to begin with. So as a habit, even when I don't necessarily see the mass that clearly, I will always think about, okay, the legs need to connect to the torso, and they usually do right up here. So I'll always draw a ball, a sort of ellipse. You know, it's similar to the connection here, but it's got more actual mass to it. So you could actually describe the surface as being rounded like this, but it really depends on what you're drawing, on your reference image. So usually I just leave it as an ellipse. I don't draw additional contour curves on it, at least not just yet. So I do the same thing for the back. Now note that I'm actually not drawing this from a reference image. I'm just throwing forms onto the canvas and seeing what happens. So some of my decisions might not be super realistic, but I'm mostly working from memory, so they might be okay. So the second point about the legs that I want to mention is that I start breaking my own rules a little bit. Now, we've been working a lot in form over the past 2 lessons, the plants and the insects. And the thing is that it's important to always be aware of the fact that you're drawing forms, but what you actually put down onto the canvas may not always be fully three-dimensional. Now, the reason for this is that in certain cases, such as the legs, they tend to have a lot of flow to them and gesture to them. So I find that two-dimensional shapes will carry a sort of gesture much more easily than actually having to worry about, while you're actually constructing it. Oh dear, what did I just hit? Whoops. Anyway, what was I saying? So if you're trying to draw a 3D form that has gesture at the same time, it can get tricky. So because you're worrying about 2 different things at the same time, you're worrying about gesture and you're worrying about that form. And so, I mean, if you're good at it, you might be able to manage something, but generally it's not a great idea to tackle multiple challenges simultaneously. So instead, what I end up doing is I just treat these as more 2D shapes while I'm drawing them. I know in my mind that they're three-dimensional, that they have faces and different faces, that is, and that they've got volume to them, but right now I'm choosing to hold back on that in my drawing. I'm not sure if that's actually correct. Oh, that's right. Okay. So now the thing is that they're, like I said, they're 2D shapes, but you can tell that because I'm still thinking of them as being 3D forms, I am making certain little subconscious choices, like having rounded caps here. You could just as well make them straight. But the more aware of your forms you are, the harder it is to kind of detach from them. But that's not a problem. That's actually a good thing, because it's not something you're consciously thinking about. As long as it's in your subconscious, it's not distracting you from what you're trying to do at this moment, which is capture the flow and gesture of this sort of back and forth zigzagging pattern that the legs have. Now, once you've got them on there, then you can start making the little refinements that actually show you that they've got form. So you might actually start adding a couple contour curves here and there. You might refine how these are connected, and always remember that these connection points are important. Don't draw, okay, that's a bad example. Don't draw like that. This bend here, actually mark out how it's, like where that point of bending or that pivot really is. It just helps you to better understand how everything is moving. In terms of actually rendering your forms, sometimes it really helps, and I've mentioned this in previous lessons, I'm sure, but it really helps to purposely flatten out the two limbs on the opposite side of your drawing, because it helps to push these four limbs forwards, and it makes them much more, it kind of draws the attention of your viewer. Remember, whenever drawing any organic forms, you really should push yourself to maintain a fairly consistent, this is not going well, width to the form. Yeah, that's terrible. Now, you'll make mistakes, as I am clearly doing right now. Ultimately, what we're doing in these exercises and in the homework, it's not about drawing pretty drawings, it's about making all the mistakes that you need to learn your lessons. Because we all need to become very accustomed to the kinds of mistakes that we tend to make. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit too caught up in this. So the next point is all about head construction, which is something that a lot of people struggle with. Now, the biggest mistake people tend to make is that they'll deal with lots of nice form and construction with their body, and then they'll kind of just ignore the same concepts when dealing with the head. And there's really no reason to do that. Instead, what you want to do is you want to remember that this, being the cranium, is the sort of back part of the head, and everything is going to be extruded off of that. So the most common thing that you see in animals is that they've got a muzzle or a snout, and that is usually just a simple, well, a reasonably simple at least, box that comes off like this. And notice how this edge here, where the box is connecting to the ball, it's curving and wrapping around the ball. And this is important because it's just two forms that are intersecting with each other. And of course there's going to be more complexity to it, but you just keep building up more forms. And another important thing to be aware of is eye sockets. Before I draw the eyes, I'll always block in my eye sockets, because it really helps both to situate the eyeball inside of the skull and also deform that skull so that it can wrap around the eyeball, and so that other features like the brow ridge and so on will actually be modified in order to make everything feel like it fits together. Anything that comes off the cranium, or off of any form really, should be wrapping around. I'm actually still not sure what I'm drawing. If it's not starting to look more like a dog.
失陪招，你都未得陪，點樣失陪啊？你要得咗陪先㗎嘛。
This is all kinds of messed up. That's what happens when you don't work from reference, and you don't actually plan out what you're doing beforehand, I suppose. Anyway, so I will actually do another quick demonstration of how to construct a head in a little bit, but the next thing I want to talk about is fur. Did not do that. Keep hitting the wrong button. Okay, fine, I'll just do this. Okay, so now when most people draw fur for the first time, they get completely overwhelmed by all the little bits of detail that's present in their reference image. And so they think of it as trying to draw every individual bit of fur. And eventually they start to realize that there is way too much fur to draw, and they lose their minds, or they get really sloppy, as I've done. And they start to zigzag and do all this garbage that you should absolutely avoid. The thing is that when you start to get really overwhelmed with whatever you're doing and you start to get sloppy, you start to rely more and more on randomness. And randomness is the devil. If you start to rely on randomness, then everything just looks chaotic unplanned, poorly designed, and just really badly crafted. It's very obvious that there's no actual thought and intent that's gone into the drawing. And so that's always something you want to avoid. Even though something may look very, very chaotic, it almost never is. There's almost always a certain rhythm or pattern or flow to whatever's going on, just because of the way that physics works. If you think about hair, hair doesn't just go off in any and every direction. Clumps of hair form because hair tends to flow in the same direction. If you have a breeze going across a field of grass, all the grass, or at least a lot of the grass, is going to flow in the same direction as the wind. So there's no reason to ever rely on randomness. Now, this may require you to pay very careful attention to your reference image, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. It's going to be difficult, it's going to be a pain in the ass, but you have to roll with it. Now, there are a few tricks that make drawing for a hell of a lot easier, and so I will show them to you right now. And it's very likely that I've talked about this sort of thing in the past, but I'm just going to repeat myself because it's very relevant here, because animals tend to have fur. So the first thing here, I tend to say that there's a lot of first things, but whatever, is that the silhouette is important, and I know I've talked about this before. Information that you put inside of a shape doesn't tend to get registered until fairly late in the game. Meaning your eye, when it looks at something, goes through many phases where it notices different details. And the first thing that it's going to look at is the actual silhouette. So if you think of your drawing as being solidly filled with black, any detail that you put inside is ignored at this point. And that's the first thing that your eye sees. So any information, however, that breaks this kind of regular curve stands out a lot. And this is actually why when you see someone that you know at a distance, where you can't actually make out any of the internal detail, but you can tell that it's still that person that you know, the reason for this is because there's two things and they're related. It's their silhouette, which has a very distinct outline, and it's their motion, which influences the silhouette that you see, the way they move. And so any character designs, you'll often see that concept artists will do sheets and sheets of silhouette brainstorming. And this is because the silhouette is such a key part of a character design that if reduced to just that simple outline or filled in shape, they still need to be recognizable. And so coming back to fur, it's an extremely useful tool that we can use because you can demonstrate very easily that a surface is bumpy like this, or jagged or spiky or whatever. Or, in our case, furry, or hairy for that matter. And all of this information is seen by the eye very quickly, and because it makes that first impression, it's a very strong impression. Now, one thing that you absolutely need to avoid is just attacking it with these stupid little individual lines that I tend to see people doing. there's several things wrong with it. One of them being that it creates a bunch of tangents to your shape. And a tangent is when a line is 90 degrees to another line. And tangents tend to make people very uncomfortable and stressed out. So you want to avoid that kind of effect. So the solution to that, now this still looks dumb because you have actually this kind of looks bad because it's just sticking out, is that they don't have the patience to really take the time and craft and design each one of these little tufts. So they'll kind of just go like this
晏晝好，
and hope for the best. Don't do that.
唔知佢係咪自毀緊？
All of our drawing exercises are about being very
我自學緊。
intentional with every single thing we put down on the page. If you just kind of zigzag and scribble or whatever along the edge, not only is that going back to our annoying randomness bit, but it's just sloppy. So don't do it. There's no reason to. Have the patience to actually carefully design each and every little mark that you put in. If it's intentional, if what you are trying to do is conveyed to your viewer, then it will look good. If you don't even know what you're trying to accomplish, then there's no way in hell that's going to happen. Now, there are situations where you might want to include a little bit of fur texture on the inside of a form, but it's something you want to use very sparingly. If you try and push your fur textures too hard, things will go bad very quickly. So usually when dealing with texture inside of a form, I usually tackle it as being the transition between dark and light. And the whole tuft of fur thing still applies here. I mean, I did rush in with a bit of hatching there, which probably wasn't the most appropriate. Now, the thing is that I don't use that. When something is furry and I can avoid it, I don't necessarily like using them as transition areas. Instead, whenever I've got like a sort of, this is probably a bad example. Whenever I've got a ridge, like between two muscles, often, like, animals tend to be very muscular, like tigers and bears and things like that. They've got a load of muscle on them, but oftentimes it's very obscured by all the fur on them. But you can still catch little glimpses of where, two muscle groups overlap. Oh, that's getting hairy. So, an area like this, where you get this sort of dip between muscles, that's usually where you actually see the lines that kind of show you that something is muscular. It's because one muscle is overlapping another. Now, if you want to show that in fur, you can't just draw the usual solid lines. Instead, you kind of have to use some very gentle hatching, maybe with slightly longer, more flowing lines. So that instead of where you would have had a straight line, or a smooth line, or unbroken line, whatever, you would have this sort of hatching texture, and you might have a little bit coming off of it. But it's generally a very light touch. You don't want to go too heavy with these things because they start to get way too cumbersome and distracting. That's why this approach with your silhouette is the most important. Because it allows you to be it allows something to make an impact without being super distracting. It's really keying into your viewer's subconscious, because they're not fully aware, there aren't that many marks involved, all of this is empty. But they still understand that this surface is hairy, it's furry, it's not smooth. And you can use that with any texture, bumpy textures, jagged textures, like I showed you before. And you should use your silhouettes as much as possible, as they are very effective. Yeah. Now, I think that's the last point I wanted to make, so the last thing that I'll do is these two little demonstrations I have of how you can break down specific reference images into different kinds of forms and construction. Basically, how to apply construction to these subjects. So the first thing is going to be this horse head. As I mentioned before, I wanted to talk specifically about how to use construction when making heads so that people don't end up with random, floaty, ungrounded details. If you ever draw something that feels like it's floating, that it doesn't actually have anything informing you as to where that detail should go, like just an eye sitting on a form randomly with no socket to fit into, you're doing it wrong. Everything needs to be grounded and connected to something else. Nothing exists in a vacuum, and you'll never have a sort of, you'll never have. What can I draw?
佢隻眼勁靚喎，其實。
Something like that. It's always going to be objects wrapping around each other, connecting with each other, and so on. So you can have an eyeball, you can have an eyelid wrapping around that eyeball, and coming up to the brow. And then you've got the bridge of the nose coming down and all that garbage. So everything always has to be connected and grounded in something else. So with this horse head, this is basically what I was talking about before, where you got your cranium. I've got the neck coming down here, which is kind of besides the point. And then you've got this box that is curving around the cranium as where it connects to it, and then the box comes down. And you can see that there's a little flaring of the box down here. This isn't necessarily something I'd include right off the bat. I'd build a much larger box. Like that, or something. And then I'd break it down, and you'll see me doing that in a second. So, start off with your cranium, and what I always like to do, although in my drawings you tend to see it being quite sloppy, because when I draw ellipses on my Cintiq, they tend to come out like crap. But always be aware of the center lines of your balls. Whatever.
講衰嘢，聲聲。
This new driver I installed is really making my lines wobble. Or maybe it's just my hand, because I've been on vacation, and I've gotten rusty. So I've got the neck coming down. I haven't really put too much focus into that because it's not that important right now. And here's our box. So you'll notice that the box is coming down the full length, all the way down to the end of the snout. And so I will build upon the end part of it, but for now I'm just leaving it coming straight down so that we have a basic scaffolding on which to build the further information. And this is where I'm doing that. So instead of actually instead of flaring it out like this, I decided that looking at this horse head, it actually kind of narrows in. And so I kind of cut into the box instead of building on top of it. And as I mentioned before, I've got these eye sockets, which are super important, and you can actually use them to kind of show how this is a sort of contour line, but it's more geometric because it's heads tend to be quite planar, even though they don't always look that way. Being aware of how these lines come down and connect to everything can be very useful when it comes to construction. And honestly, I'm just kind of making these lines up. It's not like they're actually situated on the head, but they really help me understand how my forms fit together. And then you just add more details. You can fit your eyes into the sockets. How they connect. And as usual, these are all additional construction lines that we're drawing right now, and you'll be drawing them for a long time as you get used to understanding how form all fits together. Now, ideally, eventually, the lines that you're drawing, that you're actually putting down, will start to leak into your subconscious, and you'll be able to visualize them instead of drawing them quite as much as you do right now. But don't worry about the fact that these drawings aren't clean and neat and tidy. Every line that we put down is deliberate and has a certain purpose to it, but you can't, like right now, you're just not ready to go without those lines. Think of it as training wheels. I'm already hitting the 40-minute mark. I try to keep these videos for 40 minutes, but this is the last little demo that I've got, and it's a more complete drawing of this tiger. And so here's the initial forms that we talked about. There's the ribcage, which, as I mentioned, I kind of approximated to fit within the tiger itself. It's not just a sphere. The angle is important, and I'm trying to keep an eye on how all of that fits together. Same with the pelvis, although I probably could have made the pelvis a little bit more narrow. But, you know, these steps because we're using them to build a more complete sausage, we can kind of let those things go a little bit. Just make sure that the sausage comes out right. That's the main thing, because the sausage, the torso, is what everything builds on top of.
都係腸仔啊，全都是
And
腸
then
仔
you've got
啊。
these legs coming off the actual side of the torso, not from the bottom. And they're broken up into straight sections.
Ouais.
And this section of the legs are all two-dimensional at this point because I'm just focusing on how they're laid out and their basic gesture, not so much on their form. So, cranium, ribcage, pelvis.
Oh.
Make the ribcage and the pelvis into a sausage. That's really annoying. Make sure that you nail that connection and kind of cut the front of the front of the rib cage to be flat so you can connect the neck to it.
Okay.
And as with that previous drawing, I've got a tail coming off of here, and it's just I didn't actually draw the spine. You don't always have to, but it's probably a good idea.
好似
if you're
好
starting
易畫
out.
咁，即刻。
And try and keep your widths nice and consistent. As I mentioned before, that's actually quite
但佢
difficult,
上
so
面嗰
don't
嚿
worry
係
too much.
咩啊？
Mess it up. Mistakes are normal.
上面嗰嚿點出
So the
嚟
next？ point is that, as you can see here, I have that little dip in the tiger, or his back, or the sausage actually, but it's actually got an extra lump here.
OK。
And so I've gone here and added an additional form, and I did the same thing here where my sausage didn't quite get that sort of shoulder bump. Now I'm jumping into constructing the legs, so I need to know exactly where they're going to connect to the body, and it's not as clear here, but you know, if you look closely, you can see that there's a little pinch here. Something like that, maybe. And here, also be aware of this sort of pinch where because when you've got fur, and especially these stripe patterns, you know, they exist because they help tigers camouflage in the woods. So it's all about breaking up their form and making them much harder to see. And so the actual underlying, it actually helps camouflage the underlying forms as well. It just makes a very, you know, irregular pattern. Actually, it's kind of an irregular pattern, but anyways, it breaks up the shadows that you might see from their underlying forms. So it can be very tricky at times to make this out, so it will take practice to become accustomed to what kind of forms are lying under there. So you just need to try your best to identify them and make a hell of a lot of mistakes along the way. And here are my legs. They're just simple two-dimensional shapes. But of course, as always, I'm still aware of the fact that they're 3D, so I never want to like, ignore that completely. I never want to just be drawing, you know, basic crappy shapes like that. This one is actually kind of this one is actually kind of important, and I will highlight it in red. Now, basically the only thing I've done here is I've tucked in the belly a little bit just before it hits the back leg, and this is actually something you see very often in a lot of different four-legged animals. And the tiger's got it going on right here. Actually, it's more like here because this is more of a tuft of fur. And it's just little things like this that as you continue to practice and study these animals, you start to notice these things. So you may not catch it immediately, but over time you'll start to realize that there's these little common things, because all these animals, you know, they have common ancestors and they're constructed in very much a similar way. And that's actually probably a little hint as to where the ribcage ends. Although here you can tell that in my drawing it doesn't match up, but that's my mistake. So now I'm going to construct the head. So I've added an additional ball because my cranium kind of got lost and it was probably a little too small. But remember that I'm not outright just ignoring previous construction. I'm building that ball onto the existing nub of that neck. And here, I won't go too much in depth with this, but it's basically the same thing. You know, I've got my muzzle that wraps around the cranium ball. I've got my eye sockets to make sure that I can fit these, you know, I have somewhere to place the little eyeballs. And here I'm just really refining my forms.
Oh my
You
god.
don't see that tigers have this sort of shape like that. And it's more fur than anything else, I think. I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but whatever. And here I'm just kind of reinforcing some line weights, and it's gotten really cluttered and really messy already, and honestly, I probably should have drawn it with a much thinner brush tip size. But what's done is done. And so I was a bit on the fence about whether or not I would actually add these stripes, just because there's already such a mess there already, and texture, of course, not that important. We're focusing on the underlying form construction, which pretty much stops here, but I figured it would be good to just finish it up all the way. And so, because I'm working in Photoshop, and I've been doing this specifically for a step-by-step demo that I'll put... Actually, I mean, this was the step-by-step demo. I can just hide some of these layers and show you what the cleaner version of it would look like, and it's something like that. And so even though the underlying contour lines, a lot of them are gone, the impact that they had in my understanding of how these forms are all laid out is still somewhat apparent there.
Tommy 豬錫錫
And so
錫錫你
that's
老婆
honestly
啊，
pretty
唔好
much
錫
all I
錫
have.
我，黐線！
I've also done 3
我係想
demos
背
that
叛
I
你
added
老婆豬。
lesson page today. So as you can see here, I have these 3 demos, but they're old, and they do follow the constructional method, but it's a much more, watered down, more 2D, less 3D form kind of thing, which was the way that I initially learned it. But I personally find the stress on 3D forms from the get-go, like here, this isn't stressing very many 3D forms, but I do end up pushing it later on in the demo. Now I found that for students it's a lot better to do that right from the beginning, and to immediately think of this is not a circle, this is a ball, or anything like that, and to be more aware of how things intersect.
好，放工
Yeah,
先
some
再
of
入
these,
嚟
demos are
，OK，
not
加油！
strongest. And so I
終於有一次唔係入嚟話咩去緊旅行
followed in your one more
Buddy.
than the old ones. And also, another thing to be aware of is that there's all these extra demos that I've done as parts of critiques, and these can be very helpful. I usually write a lot of notes on them. So, like about fur and, the whole tangents and scribbling, and this one kind of shows how you can apply the various ways of showing fur. Like, you can use it as a transition between light and dark, you can put it along the silhouette, you can have little bits here and there on the inside. Yeah, these can be quite helpful. So that's pretty much it. I hope you've enjoyed the video,
Pretty
and I hope
much
it helps
it.
clarify some of the material in the lesson.
Pretty much
Still,
it. Pretty
this is
much
not,
it.
a standalone thing. This is
blah
just
blah
an
blah.
introduction to the lesson itself.
哇，1個鐘啦咁就
Holy
，Holy fuck，
lessons
Holy
slash
shit，
5.
啊啊黐孖筋，黐孖筋。跟住咧，重溫一次先。頭骨、肋骨、盤骨，跟住先畫一條腸。嗰條腸就係個軀幹，跟住就畫條頸，條頸就記得畫嗰個 connect 嗰個位。我好想瞓覺，點搞啊？ 因為啲毛喎，啲毛就之前都教過啦。其實再重溫一次咯，係嘛？唔睇字啊，黐孖筋，勁多字啊！OK，跟住咧 ，Before starting the homework, be sure to go through all of the demonstration included in this lesson. I strongly recommend drawing along with them as well, and following them closely when doing so. Also remember that this homework must be drawn from a reference. When looking for reference, I recommend that you specifically look for those of a high resolution. Okay, rough. To get you started, check out 咩啊？仲要 check out 呢個 ，OK？ 你話咩咪咩咯？你話點咪點咯？咩啊？喺度睇啲圖啊，係嘛 ？OK， 幾好喎，又真係幾好噶喎，冇推介錯噶喎，聲聲 OK。幾好㗎噃，正喎，但我真係好眼瞓，救命！唔係好想畫，唔係好想畫嘢。要總共有幾多啊？2頁就咩啊 ？Organic intersection。Holy fuck！ 呢個啊，2頁堆疊嘅腸仔，又要再畫。OK， 2版雀仔，一版就冇 detail， 一版有 detail。4版咩啊？Long-hoofed quad 咩？呢個咩嚟㗎？冇提四足動物，打錯字喎。
Non-hoofed quadrupeds.
Quadruped。冇提，即係嗰啲貓狗、獅子、老虎嗰啲係嘛？ 跟住就2版、4版有睇嘅，馬嗰啲應該係咯。2版 Random Animals of Your Choice 啊，1版 Hybrid， 咩係 Hybrid 啊 ？The previous piece of effort。Preferably once you have had the chance to combine them to make some interesting new creatures. 要畫合成獸了嗎？正喎，可以創作一隻合成獸出嚟喎。人類加鱷魚會點啊？咩嚟嘅貓魚？冇嘅。嚇？唔通係大哥哥？咩？食揾唔到啊 ，Google 唔到啊！我呢站阿 Sub 大哥哥難道係？No， 但係畫合成獸之前要畫好多嘢先，黐孖筋。今日淨係畫腸仔算啦，作為呢個久違嘅畫畫練習。腸仔熱身，必勝一身。腸仔熱身都好麻煩嘅，不過我而家應該 OK。而家應該應該就冇問題嘅，提問冇嘅，係嘛？唔係喎，都有問題嘅。個問題就係我好唔想畫畫。我好想瞓覺啊！點搞啊？1000小時轉不直播啊！轉咗。1000小時學轉筆計劃。點解佢可以狂轉嘅？轉得咁快，黐孖筋！呢個OK。呢個食啦。有啲唔識㗎 ，reverse， 喂， 有冇支好轉啲㗎？咁樣我學唔到轉筆㗎喎，咁樣好難搞㗎喎。支原生筆呢？點解我又唔見咗支筆嘅？同日仲見到佢㗎。咁樣好尷尬㗎喎，直播學轉筆，跟住唔見咗支筆。呢排成日都唔見嘢，係咪代表我個人冇乜？最近個人冇乜規律，最近個人諗諗亂，喺度啲嘢都唔知擺咗喺邊。What the fuck？原來我冇收到出嚟嘅。點解佢可以轉到咁勁嘅 ？What the fuck？收起手指，哇！嚇！唔得，我太輕啦呢支。黐孖筋。OK，轉筆環節，完畢。
嗯哼哼哼哼哼，嗯哼哼。腸仔，腸仔。睇多次先。I love 腸仔。熱下身先，都唔使點熱嚟，其實冇理由嚟個熱身嘅熱身噶嘛，啱唔啱啊？啱唔啱啊 ？OK， No bullshit。bullshit 咗好耐啦，已經。喂，喂。No。What the fuck？
誒
哇，好核突。係咪咁樣？哇！太細條。我連腸仔都唔識畫啦，而家。GG。哇！咁多腸係咪準備畫 H 漫？唔係啦，黐線！腸係畫畫嘅基礎啊 ，you know， 腸 is all is 腸。腸 for all for 腸 ，you know。真咩？我 sensei 係咁講㗎咯。我 先生好中意搶嘅。睇唔到畫緊咩開始。搶的世界，其實呢個世界都係由搶構成，然後冇搶就冇我，冇搶亦都冇你。人人是搶，搶是人人。You love 搶，搶 love 你。差唔多啦，係嘛？畫多條腸。星星中意腸，你中意包。即係你畫，咁即係你畫畫嘅時候係畫包先嘅。可唔可以咁樣理解？你嘅畫係由包構成，係咪？你同先生係兩個門派。So I say I love 腸，只有腸恆久不腐。生活在腸腸裏，希望從未給沾污。You try next time。要開發呢個包畫畫法了嗎？腸給我磨練困苦，笑着去吃腸。跟住係咩啊？必怨恨腸來呵護。So I say I love 腸，只有腸恆久不腐。只淡靜歲月變長長，即使要蒙着我腸，我亦敢高呼。全憑腸為我堅持，還有腸腸的照顧。點樣加型啊？加型加醋啊！咁好真係。原來我曾經畫過啲咁嘅嘢，原來係咁難㗎。喂！
How to 諗啊？花半了相似功夫，只淡靜歲月變長長。Hi， 我做漏咗一個步驟喎，我要畫返，都唔使嘅，都唔使嘅，唔使嘅。我覺得呢支筆好快冇墨，咁樣玩法之前一撇撇撇。我要知唔知邊度有冇得上網買呢啲筆？香港因為貓語下就會話我嘅先至用筆畫畫，我嘅先至再用墨水。唔識冇上網買，路過文具鋪就夠買，因為我通常路過樓下嗰啲就冇啊嘛。要去到好遠，要出街先得。最近想創作節節大戲，其實冇咩衍生問題咁就好咯，即係唔會肚痛嗰啲係嘛，咁就唔會肚痛胃痛咁就好咯。但我最近直播就會頭痛啦，直到我直播衍生嘅問題就係會頭痛啦、肚痛啦，同埋變弱智滯咯。不過又咁講，變弱智滯呢一 part 就有少少爭議，因為有人就話我本身係一個弱智仔。 我就冇辦法變成弱智仔，有呢個講法嘅坊間，不過我自己就唔認同。因為通常認知到自己係弱智嘅人都唔係好弱智，不太弱智啦。雖然都可以係，但係就我覺得我未弱智到去就係話知道去，例如有啲咩呢？例如落堂就會變咗落鹽嗰啲咯，我未去到呢個地步。咁樣就所以我係比較認同我係開台開到變弱智咯。咁樣就一收台就正常返咯，可以。咁樣就同埋變弱智都係我一個直播策略嚟，因為人通常係對啲弱啲嘅同類啊，或者係比較，總之就係弱勢嘅嘢啦，就會比較有同情心。咁如果我直播扮弱智咧，咁大家就會同情我多啲，咁就可能會令到我得到一啲嘅捐款，去贊助我呢一個弱智仔開台。咁樣就都係開心嘅，因為傻有傻福嘛，勝有勝福嘛，係嘛？咁樣就同埋大家都鍾意睇啲人扮弱智啊嘛，咁樣就大家都開心咯。咁大家都開心，又可以笑到成弱智仔咁樣啦，咁咪大家都弱智嘅，大家都開心咯，係嘛？咁樣其實都冇話唔得㗎，都幾好啊。所以話自撚鳩就係咁解啦，弱智撚鳩，弱智撚鳩，弱智他撚鳩。就係咁樣咯。咁如果你話咩弱智唔好啊，如果弱智有啲咩直播建議，我會答你就係食呢個大橋流水麵咯，或者小橋流水麵都得，因為大家都鍾意睇女人㗎啦，係嘛？又鍾意睇人嗰啲咩食播嗰啲，咁兩樣夾埋咪無敵咯！即係又有得睇大橋或者小橋，又有得睇人食嘢，咁樣就最開心咯！我會話，咁樣就咁，但係你話唔開心都冇辦法。因為開唔開心唔係我話事啊嘛，有啲人睇呢個小丑又開心，有啲人睇呢個 小李飛刀又開心，但係人人唔同咯，只可以話係嘛？冇理由話咩？你睇小李飛刀啊，當你弱智嘅，喂，都唔係啊，我都可能當你弱智，但係都唔緊要啊，最緊要開心，做人就最緊要開心啊嘛。咁但係睇人唔開心都開心㗎，有時咁樣就唔一定個個都開心咯。如果咁樣講嘅話，係嘛？有時你都不得不承認，睇人唔開心係勁開心嘅啊，所以就認同請分享咯，都冇辦法。如果唔分享都冇辦法，咁樣就唯有係咁㗎啦，係冇計嘅呢啲。覺得慶幸冇咩影響，怕少帶來更多壞影響，咁咪好咯。因為我打邊爐都鍾意食響鈴，咁食響鈴就大家都鍾意㗎啦，係嘛？咁樣就大家都冇壞影響就最好咯。睇先佢身體畫埋嗰啲啊。呢度都唔知點畫，就係咁樣咯。最緊要唔好害到世界，其實鍾意做自己興趣嘅事係得，害到世界睇你點睇啊！即係如果好似夏油傑咁樣，佢算唔算做到自己興趣？佢做嘅嘢，佢又做緊自己興趣啦。然後大家覺得哇，佢殺非術師咁樣就好唔人道啦，就要殺返佢啦。但其實佢係為緊個世界好啊，所以呢個都難講少少咯。就唔係個個都一樣係，即係唔係自己覺得冇害到世界就冇害到啊。喺唔同人嘅角度都可能會有唔同嘅答案啦。即係好似我畫腸咁樣，好似冇傷害到人，冇傷害到個世界，好似。但係其實我從來都冇諗過，冇喺腸嘅角度諗過，即係可能啲腸唔鍾意我咁樣將佢哋擺喺台面講嘅，係嘛？啲腸就會有黑 feeling 嘅，咁樣其實我傷害咗啲腸咯，只不過係大部分人都諗唔到呢一點，忽略咗可能呢小部分嘅嘢，咁其實都係傷害緊世界嘅某一 part。 咁但係都冇計嘅，呢種搶就係世界咯，其實世界就係搶咯。咁都冇辦法，真係冇辦法呢個。
笑着去吃腸，嘟嘟嘟嘟嘟嘟嘟。多。
睇下先。
是要蒙着我唱，大聲歡呼。
次想演鏡子迷宮呢個公演得啩？鏡子迷宮可能要問下 Miwa 先得。Miwa 會唔會有版權㗎呢個？咁就真係問下花姐咯，可能。因為我始終唔係嗰啲電視劇，唔係即係唔係嗰啲電視廠嗰啲員工， 都唔係好知呢啲嘢。頂呢劈唔好諗過劈住，搞咗左邊先。呢個做咩凌空嘅？唉，真係搞笑喎！乜鬼嘢？點樣畫過嚟嘅？凌空都冇辦法啦，但係我先。我冇咗嗰個前後觀念咯，喂，唔係啱嘅，呢個冇前後係啱嘅，都得嘅，都得，睇下先。根據非正式研究顯示，畫畫有損精神健康，珍惜生命，遠離畫畫。呢個是真的，我認同你嘅講法。即係經過咗差唔多200個鐘嘅洗禮之後，我智力係大概下降咗30%左右嘅，即係我得返大約110 IQ 左右。大約啦。有咗咁嘅故事就節子，但係可接納。可唔可以接納就要睇天賦嘅安排呢個，因為天賦其實 嗰個接納程度好低。喐啲又係要滅城啊，又係要大清洗啊。如果大家係反希特拉嘅話，應該要反埋呢個耶和華耶穌嘅。但係我就唔明點解大家呢個世界咁多人支持耶和華或者耶穌咯。唔知做乜，希特拉唔講得，耶穌又講得啊！即係話人類都係腸嚟嘅，都是腸嚟嘅，不用分那麼細，係嘛？呢度應該都得。總而言之，會諗清楚可否創作，但版權受限，最喜歡落客人出得太多，節子大氣嘅話唔應該公開。有咩版唔版權啊？你唔係攞嚟賺錢就冇人理你㗎。版權呢家嘢好死嘅啫。攞嚟賺錢咪侵犯版權咯，係嘛？即係如果你講我呢個咩全人類都是腸腸呢句説話攞去賺錢，我都會告你啊！即刻如果有人攞去咩開腸腸餐廳，跟住抄我呢句人類就是香腸。即刻告到甩褲，生物就是香腸。呢啲一講我即刻告，大家記得幫我留意下，有冇呢啲不法人士？不法人士唔係講緊唔剪頭髮嗰啲嚇，講緊侵犯版權法嗰啲人。唔剪頭髮嗰啲就建議佢剪頭髮咯，冇計，冇辦法。但係佢唔剪頭髮，你又吹佢唔脹，呢個都難搞少少，其實少少咯。好難捉嗰啲唔剪頭髮嗰啲人。唯有就係見而即報啦，唔係點啊？係嘛？
但係呢度都要澄清返啦，建議唔係講緊新李哥哥隔離嗰個易建議啊，係見到可疑嘅人冇搞錯，呢一點好緊要㗎。樣樣就呢度好似有啲奇怪，咁但係奇怪都係咁樣㗎，冇啊，就係咁樣。OK， 問題就係呢個，究竟呢個喺呢嚿嘢上面定入面好咧？如果喺上面嘅話，其實呢嚿嘢係遮住晒下面所有嘢，係咪？咁樣我會話咧，都係難搞少少嘅。但係如果喺入面就易好多啦，就入面啦，唔好逼死自己啦，係咪？啱唔啱啊？咁樣。 我攞啲去解凍啲嘢，等陣。哦，畫腸真開心，畫腸真有趣，畫腸世一。畫腸衝力射球，畫腸好比食意粉，畫腸好比。好，突然間諗到其他嘢，得唔得咧？得唔得咧？畫腸世一。腸世一，No，咁樣得唔得？俾唔俾？俾唔俾？頂好唔 smooth 啊！唉，果然我畫腸功力不足，唉。
果然係咁，聲姐講得冇錯，腸係要練㗎，畫腸係要練㗎。咩嚟㗎？點解咁陰沉嘅呢個？咁陰森嘅喂？啲音樂，誒？接下來啲腸腸點搞啊？接下來就 點解硬係畫得咁唔順利嘅？諗樣呢應該係最逼。零 B 威台 ，what the fuck？這是零 B 的威台嗎？請問？但係我今日唔睇起木屋喎，零 B。I am the man. I am not the man. I am the sausage. We all are the sausage. You know? You know what the fuck I am saying? We are just sausages. 臘腸執咗咯，臘腸就好可惜，執咗了。零 B 今日教 what 啊？我記得零 B 係令到我成日令到我不平衡，心理不平衡嘅一個直播，就係星期六日就喺度周圍去，搞到我勁唔想練畫，極度心理不平衡，最衰都係零 B。What sausage am I drawing? I'm drawing. 佢哋冇分㗎喎，佢哋就係搶咯，人人是搶，搶是人人咯。Everything is sausage， 不用分那麼細。都是遠調。你可以覺得佢係小腸、大腸，咩都得，巨腸又得，12指腸又得，係嘛？龍腸又得，死！感謝威台啊！ By the way。怪怪的，奇奇怪怪咁。 預定創作劇目，有邊堆唔得？考魯判字廉智力係組句估表符猜表情符號船碟博財力雜技轉碟係有邊堆唔適宜公開直播？邊堆唔適宜？下先。考魯判字廉會唔會唔係咁適宜？因為好似我呢啲啦，即係代入我嗰個角度啊，咁我本身係少少弱智啊嘛，跟住如果我係咁答錯，跟住你判斷咗我又係弱智咁樣，係嘛？咁咪會傷害到我感情咯。咁呢個就可能唔太適合啦，我覺得，即係在我而言，在我呢個弱智仔而言，咁樣就睇下先。第二個組句估表情符號，估表情符號就睇你係估乜嘢表情符號啦。因為 WhatsApp 嗰啲就，如果係 WhatsApp 嗰啲咧就有版權嘅，咁就可能唔係咁好。咁樣就第三個咧，雜技轉碟就你係轉咩碟先？嗰啲會打爛嗰啲碟，定係膠碟？因為呢個行為有可能教壞細路仔嘅，咁樣就如果啲細路仔學你一齊轉咧，咁啊有機會打爛佢屋企嗰啲碟，咁就會教壞小朋友。但如果你轉膠碟或者轉鹹碟都唔係咁好啦，除非你冇封面出啦。如果唔係轉鹹碟都未必得，始終裸露成分居多，就可能兒童不宜咯，都係可能要去返 pornhub 嗰啲就會好啲咯。如果轉鹹碟，呢度咩事啊？樂演超低時定咩啊？超啊！出打飛機片教壞小朋友咩啊？出咗落打飛機片啊？咩事啊？出埋啲咁兒童不宜嘅嘢？可一不可再？咩叫可一不可再？一都不可啦，大佬，黐線！唔係，其實都唔係唔得㗎喎，但係你要喺返啱嘅地方咯，即係有規管嘅地方咯，就唔一定話唔得啊，未必唔得。 但有冇拎先？問題係有冇拎先？有拎再判斷。唔會諗住用 WhatsApp 配合，用紙碟轉紙碟。但係你知唔知而家地球？你哋轉紙碟會唔會有少少浪費成分？即係轉完會唔會用返嚟裝食物先？因為其實而家地球都已經係水深火熱之間，咁樣如果你轉完啲紙碟，再順便教一教啲小朋友重咧，咁樣就幾好嘅。但係如果你唔重用，我就會追擊你。地球破壞者，我會畀呢個名號你，你就正式成為地球破壞者。我呢個 average 我就會討伐你嘅 ，sorry， 因為我係嗰啲好 average 嗰啲人嚟，咁樣就自己小心。自打多下自打多下八月旁枝，咁撩精即係咩嚟嘅？黐線！哇！自打多下八月旁枝，咁撩精液，黐線！喂，唔好癲啦，大佬，好乸癲啊！喂，哇，好嘔心喎！我黐線，我要檢舉呢個，搞唔掂喎！呢段真係。呢鋪我撐柏明喎，好難講得通喎成件事啊！舉報先，呢啲算咩啊？色情內容，騷擾唔係啊，令人厭惡咯，令人厭惡同色情算唔算色情內容？猥褻內容。可以。OK， 繼續。轉場。 有啲誇喎呢個，講真，大佬唔係咁癲啊嘛？好似撞咗橋，有啲似出破毒強人嘅冰淇淋失禁劇情。我唔知咩破毒強人啦，我淨係知你講咩拍多下咩感到有精液咯，黐孖筋。唔好咁癲先。好留意嗰段情節，所以又好似跑一跑美麗戰場失禁。我唔知你講咩美麗戰場，你唔好喺度狡辯，大佬，好鬼核突。拍格雷50度陰影，原來會惹人投訴。咁你係咪寫咗3級啊？啊，係咪寫咗限制級定乜鬼啊？係咪放上 Pornhub 啊？你而家放緊上 YouTube 啊嘛，大佬。電影有分唔同級，有限制人入場噶嘛。唔好攞啲電影嚟比較，大佬，唔同啊。唔 X 同啊，兩樣嘢嚟嘅。咁你唔好話咩吓，咁人哋拍 AV 又得，你 AV 有分啊嘛，18禁止步啊嘛，18歲以下買唔到嗰啲 AV 碟噶嘛，理論上。係咪你而家影響緊我畫畫啊？唔好影響我練畫啊！邊個影響我畫腸仔啊？我要去成世都俾腸仔，都係唔好講呢啲，黐線！就應該又興奮黐孖筋。知錯教返18歲以上。主播見對我想咁表現，想但帶出嘅咩病態，你唔使同我講呢啲嘢，我唔會見諒呢啲嘢 ，sorry。我就知你而家影響緊我練畫嗰個心情。 呢度可能。好似少得滯添。不過由佢咯。6點幾，知錯唔關我事，唔好同我講，唔使同我講，都唔好同我講。咁樣啊，睇多段片。 因為段片唔係喎，唔得喎，我而家出去買飯好啲啊！如果唔係就冇燒味飯食。有筆。大家樂開到9點，我個燒味鋪開到7點就執嘢啊！大家樂咁貴咩？貴1倍啊！咁樣就下星期先畫啦，下星期先畫，咁樣啊，不如咁我收一收台先，等我食完飯再開。就咁話，冇得反駁。聽首 Cindy 就收隊。好嘛？如果鍾意呢個 channel，記得 follow Cindy 嘅 YouTube 同埋 Cindy 嘅 IG 底線 NSYEE。如果鍾意 Cindy 就 follow 返我，我會不斷 update Cindy 嘅資訊，就係咁樣啦。晏啲再見。
发现孤独的人准备动身，于是就祷告着黄昏，直到夜里他转头听见悲伤的午夜，一个善良的女子，长发翠卷，她也跟随黄昏来临，垂绿的衣裳在炉火中化为灰烬，升起灰焰，一直烧到黎明，一直到那女子推开门离去，她自言自语。 这很远的地方，有一片海滩，孤独的人他就在海上乘着船帆。如果你看到他回到海岸，就请你告诉他你的名字，我的名字。他已来临，翠绿的衣裳在炉火中化为灰烬，升起火焰，一直烧到黎明，一直到那女子推开门离去。她自言自语，在离这很远的地方，有一片海滩，孤独的人他就在海上乘着船帆。如果你看到他回到海岸，就请你告诉他你的名字，我的名字。在离这很远的地方，有一片海滩，孤独的人他就在海上乘着船帆。如果你看到他回到海岸，就请你告诉他你的名字，我的名字。
陣間返嚟睇下打機定係睇嘢啊，好嘛？陣間再算，拜！記得 follow Cindy，唔好 follow 我，拜拜。